All right, so welcome to HU 3120, scientific and technical communication. Today we're going to be talking about designing pages and documents. Um, Let me open up the share screen here. So it's very important to understand that there are rhetorical procedures. There's a rhetorical nature to the way that we design pages and documents to make them interesting, to drive interest. Without them being rhetorical, they would be, without them having some attractiveness, people tend to put these things down. So the learning objectives for this is going to be explain why the document design is important in the workplace, describe how digital and print documents differ, discuss the everyday design skills technical communicators need to have, and consider a variety of techniques for designing a reader-friendly document. We're also going to be discussing develop an audience and use profile to guide your design, explain how digital documents have special design requirements. So the layout of words and graphics determines the look of the document. I mean, that's pretty basic. The feel of it, the way that the document feels, it's going to have something to do with the way that the paper is arranged, the way that the certain things are headed. It's going to have to do with how close content might be to an image. I know many of us have gone through reading pages of any kind of manual or even things that we see online, and we see the image and then we see the text, and the text that's close to the image, we try to say, okay, this has something, and you see this in textbooks as well, that you think that the image has something to do with, you know, whatever's being said within that paragraph, and that's not always the case with those. However, it is a good idea to try to keep that as close to the image as possible. Well-designed pages are going to invite your readers into the document, guide them through the material, and help them understand and remember the information. It helps us to commit that information better to memory. Graphs, tables, we talked about those things in our last lecture. All of those things have this rhetorical structure, this rhetorical appeal that draws readers to that document. It gives you both credibility or ethos, and it gives your readers this sense of pathos, this emotional appeal, this attractiveness, this want to read it. So especially when it comes to the documents that you guys are going to be designing, or that you are designing, the popular reports, it's important to have these images set correctly. An audience's first impression tends to involve a purely visual aesthetic judgment. Does this look like something I want to read, or like too much work? And I think I discussed this the last time we had the meeting. We had a Zoom meeting where there was a study where there were two web pages, right? One web page was professionally designed. One web page was kind of sloppy, hastily thrown together. The sloppy, hastily thrown together one actually had legit correct information, while the professional looking one was just complete crap. There were lies all over it. And people tended to believe the more professional looking document over the hastily thrown together one. So it is very important that your document, as it's designed, has a good appeal to it. Like, it really needs to be aesthetically pleasing. People will decide whether or not within the first, just with looking at the document, if they're going to read it, if it's interesting. Having decided at a glance whether your document is visually appealing, logical, organized and easy to navigate. Readers are going to draw conclusions about the value of your information, the quality of your work, and your overall credibility. Today, pages come in all forms, including hard copies. These are going to be printed, PDF, web-based, ebook format, small screen sizes, and more. You have to understand that these are going to be displayed differently across the platform. So the documents that you're building for the Popular Report will display differently on Better Understandings of Science's page, whether it be hosted from or whether it be on a platform such as a laptop or computer versus cell phone. The website is designed to automatically format one over into the other, but that doesn't always translate well. So you need to make sure that when you design your documents, these things happen. They fall in place in the ways that you want them to. An old example would be those of us who have used Microsoft Word for everything, and academia uses Word for or PDF for everything, and then Google Docs comes along and says, "Oh no, buddy, we're going to throw a monkey wrench in all your stuff." And you can go in, you write your paper, everything looks perfect on Google Docs, and then all of a sudden you save that over into a PDF, or you save it over into a DOCX, and you email that to your instructor without even looking at it, because you just have that kind of faith in Google. And then the instructor gets it, and you have all this orphan text on the bottom where it's just like maybe one line or one heading, and then it jumps to the next page, or you'll have images that don't quite match up. So there are some serious formatting issues between those documents. So it's important to understand that when these are going to either be printed or if they're going to be cross-platform, you need to understand and make it so that it will translate well. A good way to do this is to save it into a PDF format, because for some reason PDF works as kind of like this snapshot of information and keeps everything the way it technically should be. But you could always go back into the Word document or the Google document and change things over as needed, save it over into a PDF until it looks like you want it to look, and then send it over that way. Despite this proliferation of formats, the most common technical and workplace documents continue to take the shape of the printed page, designed to be read in portrait mode similar to the pages of a book. And the reason why is because when you go and you sit before people at a meeting, it is easier to bring along printed paper than to say have everybody go and sync to a specific cloud. Now, I mean, that's the way we are going, but you still have older folks, you still have people like me who can barely figure out how to work Zoom here, who may have an issue trying to find and nail down how to get to those specific areas. So it's always good to have a printed format. Not only that, but you also run into some serious technical difficulties at different times. I've seen people go up and try to give speeches where PowerPoint went down or whatever. So always prepare for the worst, and to do that, paper is still the go-to. That said, paper is going to sincerely be a very different animal than something that's going to be working on a digital platform. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Smaller organizations, technical writers are often responsible for writing and designing the document. Therefore, you're going to need to be familiar with a word processing program like Microsoft Word, Google Docs. Very rarely will you see in the professional world people relying heavily on Google Docs. That's not to knock Google. Google's great, but the features can be somewhat limited when compared to paid for services, such as an Adobe program or Microsoft program. They just come with more bells and whistles, give you more options for formatting, adding images, even videos, things like that. And Google, being a free service, just can't keep up with that. Desktop publishing program, or DDP, designing complex documents. So you've got things like Microsoft Publisher is vastly popular. Um, and these you can actually format entire booklets or novels if you wanted to. Um, and these things will help you flow that information a little more easier. And it will help you within Microsoft Publisher, which I don't know if any of you guys have tried Publisher, but Publisher will actually help you put in table of contents. It's got pre-formatted designing, uh, very cookie cutter, very drag and drop, very simple, and it looks very professional when it's done. You're also going to need to be familiar with styles and templates. Styles are going to be pre-formatted options in word processing and DTP programs that make it easy for you to maintain a consistent look and feel across particular features of your document. This is going to help you keep to, styles are going to help you keep to specific uh, color schemes, so that you're not bouncing all over the place with your colors and making it look like the Rainbow Coalition just went in there and went ham and put unicorns and puppy dogs and all this other weird stuff in there that just makes it weird. Um, it helps you to keep it very professional. It's also going to help to limit the types of fonts that you're going to have. It's going to help limit the sizes of the fonts. It's going to help limit the actual typeface settings so that you're not using, going from script to Calibri to Times New Roman to all these different things and making it look a little bit more unprofessional as well. You typically want to stay with about 2 types of typeface. And not really try to get past that a whole lot. Templates, on the other hand, apply to the entire document. For example, preset templates in word processing and DTP programs for resumes, brochures, letters, sales proposals, novels. Oh my God, Microsoft Publisher has templates for novels. They have templates for all types of reports for technical communication, which is fantastic. A lot of you guys have been going in and trying to format these reports and whatnot when, there are templates out there that do these things for you. The thing you have to keep in mind with styles and templates when you're dealing with these things is make sure that you realize what it's going to be. Is it going to be printed, or is it going to be something that lives solely in a digital space? Because there's a big difference. And your styles and templates should vary accordingly. Finally, you may need to be familiar with your company's style guide or create style sheets. And you can see this in web design when they start to go out and actually design cascading style sheets where they'll have one formatted style that just runs across the gamut. Style guides are documents that describe an organization's rules for document design and language use in order to help ensure a consistent look across a company's various documents and publications. You might think that all of these are going to adhere to IEEE standards or APA, MLA, Chicago Manual Style, any of that stuff. We don't want to make it that easy for you. No way. We want to be an individual company that's going to go out there and make it a little different. Michigan Tech is guilty of this just as much as any other professional organization out there. So if you actually go Michigan Tech's IT department, and they actually have specific fonts that are consistent throughout their programming. They're fonts that they paid for. People pay gobs of money for somebody to go out and design the letters and things like that. The images, the letterheads, all of these things are consistent throughout Michigan Tech's space, and it is solely theirs and it's proprietary. So make sure that you understand what your company's guidelines are going to be. Outside of that, especially when you're looking at professional publications for journals, magazines, articles, websites, weblogs, any of that stuff. A lot of these places adhere to some stylistic standard, APA, MLA, IEEE, what have you. But they are all different too. So make sure that you understand if you're submitting it to this journal likes APA. If you're submitting it to that journal, this journal likes Chicago Manual of Style. It's fickle. So when you when you build your document, realize that it may not live within the space that you think it's going to live in. Style sheets, on the other hand, are going to specify the design elements of a particular document, such as a complex document created by a team, and these are typically digitally rendered, and these happen within a digital space. So approach your design decisions to achieve a consistent look, to highlight certain material, and to aid navigation. Consistency is key. There's nothing worse than going into a document where you think you have an understanding of how it navigates, how you can maneuver through it, and then realizing all of a sudden you have no idea because the people who designed it have switched it up from page to page. The IRS is very guilty about going in and making things far more complicated than need be. All right. Not having information can be a detriment, and not having that information in a timed manner. It's like you have a certain amount of time to enter information into an IRS document. And if you didn't happen to have one little piece of information that you had to go and try to find out of a file cabinet, and it took you longer than 10 minutes, and you get back, the whole thing resets and you have to go all the way back through the application process again. Nothing worse. That is broken design. And I don't mean to dig into a conspiracy theory here, but I swear to God, I think it's purposeful to make you go and use TurboTax. So make sure that you are going to think about 4 design categories when you're designing these. One is going to be the shaping of the page. Shaping is going to be how you're going to order things within the page, where your image is going to lie, how are you going to break up information, where are you going to put your rivers and valleys, okay? These are the little negative white spaces that go between paragraphs. And if you're running 2 columns, do you want something in between? How do you want to divide it up? How do you want to make it readable and then consistent and stay with that? You want to think about styling words and letters. If this is going to be in a digital document, your styling for words and letters is going to be different than if it is printed. Printed text, we don't typically need, digital text, we don't typically need serif fonts because we use pixels to help line the lines of text up on the screen. So, however, when you go and you print this document, it's good to have serif fonts because serifs create those. So just remember, serif is feet, sans serif without feet. So letters that have those little lines at the top and the bottom. So you know what I'm saying. If you don't, give me a thumbs up if you don't understand it. But those feet help create a line across the page, and I think we've discussed this. Adding emphasis, all right? It's important to understand that you use this sparingly. Bolding text only when necessary, because the more you bold within the document, the less effect it's going to have towards the reader. Bolding and red colors and things like that to highlight text, these things are used for important measures only. If you do it throughout the document, it starts to lose its effect, it becomes a little unprofessional, and people will not take it as seriously. Using headings for access and orientation. In technical communication, we absolutely love headings, okay? Headings make the world go round. We want to be able to jump to the parts that we care about. When you talk about circulating these documents in corporate fields or within industry, you're going to be working with a bunch of different departments, and those departments are going to jump to headings that concern them, and they don't care about the rest. So headings, headings, headings. In shaping the page, consider its look and feel and how the overall layout should be. Consider the following. Use grids, Readers make sense of pages by looking for a consistent underlying structure. So make sure that you have that going on. Vertical grids are the ones you see typically printed in IEEE documents. I know that's probably sounding funny for you guys because Michigan Tech they do a modified version of IEEE for Michigan Tech. And the reason why is because IEEE differs from profession to profession. Electrical engineering is much more different formatting than mechanical engineering. So the IEEE is going to differ between those. For electrical engineering, I know that this vertical grid, 2 columns kind of setup is the way that people tend to go, especially in publications. Then you have the horizontal grid, which is the traditional. This is the things that you have turned in essays all your life to look like. The only difference is that these are broken up with a space between paragraphs. And in academic papers, we don't tend to do that. In academic papers, the only way you know you're going from one paragraph to the next is indentation. All right. Indentation isn't necessarily as important in a technical document. All right. We use these spaces so that we can jump. And then there's the combined grid view, the hybridized view, which is going to be the long amount of text at the top, and then you're going to have 2 shorter columns at the bottom. It's basically a stylistic effect. The big difference is when you use something like this, it can be a little bit harder or a little bit more difficult to implement images into it. Okay, images and things like that can get a little bit confusing when you start to add them into this combined grid format. Provide page numbers, always, always, always. I don't know how many times I get papers turned into me that do not have page numbers. It is extremely important. Even if you think this is going to live in a digital world for the rest of its life, always add page numbers, always. Because when people go and print these things out, we drop papers, we do things, life happens. We need to make sure that we have order to the chaos, okay? Always provide page numbers. Use lowercase Roman numerals for front matter. That's your table of contents, anything at the beginning. Number the first text page with and subsequent pages with Arabic numerals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And stay consistent, all right? Use white space. Sometimes what is not on the page can make a big difference, okay? White space is used to create separation and help us to keep order in the chaos. Areas of text surrounded by white space draw the reader's eyes to those areas. So if you have a block of text as kind of like as a cutaway, as just a kind of descriptor, it will help draw their eyes over to it. I mean, we've all done it in a textbook where we've gone through a textbook and we'll look at these little, or not, we'll look at these little things under the images, or over in the margins, they'll have this little block of text that you can go through and read. And your eyes are just drawn to that. And provide ample margins. Small margins crowd the page and make the material look difficult. It can change the length of the text, and if this isn't a digital document, that can be a very big detriment. It creates eye strain. It can create eye jumping, where your eyes go from one line of text to the next line of text and you don't even realize it. So on an 8.5 by 11-inch page, leave margins of at least 1 to 1.5 inches. This will help keep your text formatted in an appropriate way, and it'll keep everything consistent and uniform and make it feel good. And if it's ever printed, we can always note take in those margins. Keep line length reasonable. Long lines tire the eyes. Short lines look choppy. All right, a reasonable line length is 60 to 70 characters per line in an 8.5 by 11-inch single column page. Again, when you start to have longer lines of text, your eyes will jump from one line of text to the next. There's nothing worse than opening up a web page that has just got these vastly long, small text paragraphs. I don't even bother. I don't even bother, and neither will many of your readers. Keep line spacing consistent. In general, single space within paragraphs and double space between paragraphs. Again, this is something that goes against academic accord. Academics, they typically don't use double space between paragraphs. The only way you can tell the difference is through indentation. But when we're talking about a technical document, we want to keep it as fluid as possible and make that document skimmable. Tailor each paragraph to its purpose. Use a long paragraph for clustering material that's closely related, and use a shorter one to make complex material easier to digest. All right. Instead of thinking of paragraphs in terms of subject matter, think of paragraphs in terms of difficulty. If you have a very complex idea, you're talking about physics of the universe, right? You want to make sure that that is going to be a short paragraph that's going to help people digest it a little bit easier. And then maybe a following paragraph that will go in and describe or help inform on that previous paragraph a little better. Make lists for easy readings. Again, in technical communication, we love bulleted lists. Whenever you find yourself writing a series of related items within a paragraph, consider using a list, whether bulleted or numbered. These help us get to the nitty-gritty. We want to get to the points that mean the most. So if you find yourself in a place where you can use a list, use a list. All right. Guidelines for shaping the page. What you want to do is you want to picture the document's overall look and feel when you make design choices about that page. How can I make this look as professional as possible? How can I make it attractive to a reader? And how do I make it look like it has credibility, that it's not something that a scientist will look at and dismiss out of pocket? Select an appropriate grid pattern on how you want to do that, whether it be traditional, 2-column, or the combined hybrid model. Use white space to make pages easier to navigate. Again, white space is important. The things that you don't say can be just as important as the things you do. Use adequate margins to make sure that you have room on the sides for people to note take if necessary. Even in digital documents today, we can still note take, but it's gotten a lot different where we can highlight a segment of text and comment on it or whatever, and it just kind of like stores that in some weird space. But the margins are still important for us to keep from running long lines of text where we create eye jumping, eye strain, all that good stuff. Keep line links easy on the eye. And for PDF documents, use white space to break up text and make it easier for people to read on a screen. After shaping the page, decide on the appropriate typefaces, type sizes, and capitalization. Consider the following. Select an appropriate typeface. All right, typeface or font refers to all letters and characters in particular style. It's going to be things like Times New Roman, Arial, Helvetica, Calibri, Script, all that good stuff. And selecting a typeface, consider the document's purpose. For visual unity, use different sizes and versions, bold, italic, small caps of the same typeface throughout your document. Make sure, though, that you remain consistent and that you aren't jumping around to a bunch of different sizes, bolding and italicizing. All right, bolding and italicizing and all that good stuff. Italicizing creates this inflection, right? So the difference between a bold and an italics. All right, bold is, almost like do this, or it is this way of really bringing an impact. So think of bold as impact and think of italicizing as inflection, right? So whenever I read, it makes me do this, right? Instead of, the bold where it's got more of an impact. So bold, and so it's got impact and inflection is how bold and italic works. Small caps for things that little numbers and things like that beside chemical compounds and all that good stuff. Make sure that you remain consistent, okay? Use typefaces that are easy to read. Stay away from scripts, webdings, anything that is cursive font. Also remember that the documents that you design may live in an international world. And sadly, many, even in this country, many people are losing the effect or losing the understanding on how to read certain types of script, especially like cursive. Uh, Oddly, to get into graduate schools these days, you have to at least be able to write uh, one long sentence in cursive. You don't have to, but they ask you to, and it can be weird. So it's something that's kind of slipping. So just keep in mind that not everybody's going to understand that cursive, or that when it goes, it doesn't always translate internationally. Use different sizes for other elements like headings, titles, and captions for emphasis. All right. Use full caps sparingly. This is a yelling feature. Nothing worse than getting a text all in caps from your mom because you know you've done something. Uppercase letters are hard to read and look like the writer is shouting at you. So use that sparingly if you use it at all. I would typically say save your full caps for emergency statements that are very small one-line text at the bottom or top of a document, or only use it for acronyms and abbreviations. Other than that, I wouldn't use it. Use a serif font such as Times New Roman for formal documents such as reports, legal communication, and letters, things that you think are going to be printed, okay? Reports, legal documents, and letters and things like that are things that could potentially be printed to be shown in a court case, to be shown at meetings, interviews, all that good stuff. So make sure that that is going to be a serif font that you can create a line on a page when it's printed. All right. Use a sans serif font such as Helvetica, Calibri, whatever, for captions, most visuals, charts, graphs, and tables and engineering specifications within that printed document. All right. So we don't need that line created for the headings because the headings are very small anyway, and we're going to be able to tell difference is going to help us maintain our line of sight on that single text. So you often, even within novels, you'll see that most of the book will be written in a serif font, but chapters, titles, things like that will typically be in a sans serif. Create visual unity by using the same typeface throughout. Don't change it up, because when you start to change things up somewhere in the document with a different kind of typeface, it brings in scrutiny. People will look at it and think, why is this important enough to get a different typeface? And keep the font sizes so that people can read them. Don't go too small. All right. Don't go too small. Don't go smaller than a 10. In fact, I wouldn't mess around with, if you're using Microsoft Word, don't go anything outside of a standard font. And a standard font doesn't necessarily mean Times New Roman size 12. All right. In fact, in the digital world that you live in now, when you open up Microsoft Word, it automatically is defaulted to Calibri size 11. All right. And that's because a lot of the things that we do nowadays lives in a digital world. So a standard font. Also, I want to talk real quick too about capitalization. The majority of people that I've seen, they'll capitalize subjects like physics, math, English, home ec, all this other stuff. Realize that the only subject that ever gets technically capitalized is English, a language. Other than that, we do not capitalize classes, subjects, things like that, unless the class is a title. Other than that, if it's a subject, we don't typically do it. That said, I would ask for you to refer like to a Google search or something of that kind of caliber to try to find out if something should be capitalized. Uh, However, if you don't know and you don't have access, be consistent. Don't capitalize it in one paragraph and then leave it uncapitalized in another paragraph. And the reason why is because that starts to look sloppy. It's better to be wrong fluidly. It's wrong. It's better to be wrong uniformly than to be wrong just throwing whatever else is out there. So if you capitalize something, stick with it. All right, stick with it to the end. Same thing goes with numbering, because you will read things about, oh well, if it's between 1 and 10, you have to spell it out, and if it's over that, then you have to put the number. No, the only people that say that are things like APA and MLA. Outside of that, there's no grammar law that says you have to do that. Remain consistent, period. If you start with that idea of, spelling out between 1 and 10, and then above that, you start putting the number, make sure that you keep that uniform throughout the entire document. If all you do is use numbers, keep it uniform. If all you do is spell it out, keep it uniform. It's better to be uniformly incorrect than to jump all over the place. So adding emphasis. Once you've selected the appropriate font, you can use different features such as boldface, italics to highlight important elements such as headings, special terms, key points or warnings, and again, or inflection. And use this stuff sparingly. The more you use it, the less effect it has. So guidelines for adding emphasis. Use indentation to set off examples, all right, explanations, or any material that should be differentiated from body copy. If it's going to be something that stands out, it's going to be different, that's when you'll use indentation in TechCom. Use ruled horizontal lines to separate sections in a long document. Use ruled lines, broken lines, or ruled boxes to set off crucial information such as warnings or cautions. All right. Typically, one space creates all of the emphasis or area that we need. But when you're talking about a document that is going to be using that white space just to divide up things of attention, sometimes having a blocked out box in red can be something that just kind of like punches your reader in the face that says, don't stick your tongue in that light socket. Use boldface for emphasizing a single sentence or a brief statement. Don't overuse it. Use small type sizes for captions, credit lines, and labels for visuals. And by small type sizes, in a digital document, I wouldn't go less than 10, okay? 10 is the smallest I would go on that thing. Anything else, you're just gonna have a reader getting upset because they can't really read the text. Avoid large type sizes and dramatic typefaces unless you really need to convey forcefulness. Again, it's okay in certain places to use that big bolded red text that says warning, do not wear a tie near this contraption or it's going to pull your head off. That could be an important thing you want to convey. And it may ask you, you may think, okay, this is one of those times where I'm going to use that large typeface, bold and red. All right. Outside of that, don't do it. Don't. Minimal. Just minimalistic is the way to go when it comes to a technical document. Use color in some documents, but if you do so, use it sparingly. Colors maybe. Other than that, I wouldn't go too crazy with it, because the reason why is because when these documents are actually going to be used by the people who read them, they may just print it off, and if they're going to print it off, it's going to be in black and white anyway. So unless it's like a resume that you're going to go out, you're going to print out, you're putting it on cardstock and all that stuff, that's one thing. But if it's a technical document like this, keep it simple. Headings announce how documents are organized, point readers to what they need, and divide the document into accessible blocks or chunks. This is called chunking. Consider the following: lay out headings by level. All right. And Microsoft Word actually will set up, and I'm sure Google Documents does this too. You can actually set your headings by level as you want to. The only problem with it is that when you do use the headings, it automatically formats it in this weird blue color, and it'll automatically go to a sans serif font. That's fine if you want to do your titles and your headings in a sans serif, that's cool. But just realize that you need to go and change the color and unless you don't want to, unless you want to keep it blue. I mean, by all means, enjoy yourself. But if it were me, I would go with black. The simpler, the better. Especially when it's a light blue and you're trying to print it on a black and white document, the letters can be hard to read. So your heading should clearly announce the large and small segments in your document. Decide how to phrase your headings. Depending on your purpose, you can phrase headings as short phrases, statements, or questions. Be direct. Do not be ambiguous. All right. It's the same way when we create a title in technical communication. We say things like process for operating backhoe equipment for Caterpillar, right? That's the title. The title says exactly what this document is going to do. It's not the ins and outs of the Caterpillar backhoe or the ins and outs of a tractor. You know, we don't get ambiguous. We don't get weird. This is not creative writing. This is telling them just what it is, period. That said, if you want to get a little bit creative and try to think of a way to say it, that's up to you. However, you need to keep it as clear as possible. I should know exactly what your document is based on the title. And the same thing is going to go with the headings. I should know exactly what is in that section for that heading, right? So make sure that your headings are clear and precise. Nothing ambiguous. Make headings visually consistent and grammatically parallel. All headings at the same level must look the same and use the same linguistic format. For example, if the first list level heading is phrased as a question, all of them should be listed as a question, right? You will even see this, especially this is something that you see typically in a PowerPoint. You'll see it begin with the first couple of letters, you know, do not do this, 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 do not do this, 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 this. So, I mean, if you want to set your sections up in that kind of format, that's one thing, but don't jump around and make these all different. All right, don't make them ununiform. Guidelines for using headings: ordinarily use no more than 4 levels of heading, section, such as section, major topic, minor topic, and subtopic. Don't try to go any more than that. Divide it logically, have a consistent flow so that these headings fall into an order, right? Maybe an order of steps or a timeline or something. Make sure that they are divided logically and it's easy to follow. Insert 1 additional line space above each heading. So instead of just the double that you have going between the paragraphs, you're going to do another double, all right? Or a triple. Never begin the sentence right after the heading with this or it. In fact, don't even begin a paragraph with the word this or it, all right? Refer directly to the object, always. The reason why is because people will tend to forget what we're talking about or whatever. It, this, and all that stuff, we don't know what you could be talking about. It could be something completely different. So stay away from this and it. All right, get to the point, say exactly what it is, and avoid using this and it to start a new paragraph or to come directly after a heading. All right. Never leave a heading floating as the final line of a page. We call this orphan text. And this is something that can typically happen when you use Google Docs and it doesn't translate well over into a Word document or a PDF. when you go and you save that, make sure that you open the thing that it was saved into and check it to make sure that there's no orphan heading at the bottom of the page, no orphan text. Everything should be with what it goes with. Okay, let's just say after a paragraph you're supposed to leave 3 lines, right? 3 lines of blank space going into the next heading. Well, all of a sudden that just leaves that little orphan text. Give it 4. Okay, we don't want that extra, we don't want that down there. We want it to have its own page and something that's going to start, keep everything together. Use running heads or headers or footers in long documents. This is a way for us to refer back to titles, refer back to chapters, refer back to sections, and help us keep up with page numbers and all that good stuff. Okay, we want consistency and we want order in this universe of chaos. In deciding on a format, know your audience and their intended use of your information. If people will use your document for reference only, make sure you provide plenty of headings for people to jump around and skim. If readers are going to follow a sequence of steps, make sure that they know how those steps fall in some kind of order, maybe through numbering. If readers need a warning, highlight that warning so it can't possibly be overlooked. All right, you don't want somebody's head getting yanked off because they wore a tie near a machine. So make sure you put that in big bold red. Don't wear a tie near this machine or it will yank your head off. If readers have asked for a 1-page report or resume, save space by using a 10-point type style face. Don't go smaller than 10 point, okay? Also, you need to understand, and let's see if that's going to go. Yeah, if readers need to evaluate something, give them a checklist for criteria. If readers are going to be encountering complex information or difficult steps, design the page so that it's easier to read, maybe in smaller text, or not smaller text, but a smaller paragraph that is more clear. Not only that, but something that is going to provide images. Images are extremely important, especially when you're talking about steps and how to do something. In addition, keep in mind cultural expectation, and ignoring a culture's design conventions can be interpreted as disrespectful. Okay, pinks and blues do not translate all that well outside of Western culture. All right, Western culture is the ones who does the pinks and blues. Pinks for girls, blues for boys. When you start using that in different texts, you just look unprofessional. In fact, in this culture, you're starting to come to a point where you're looking unprofessional. So understand that colors, schemes, the ways that we design things aren't always going to translate well into another culture. They will not see certain allusions or the ways that you format certain things the way that Western eyes typically will. Yeah. Let me go back real quick. The last thing, and it doesn't touch on that in this PowerPoint, is understand whether or not this is going to be a document that's going to live beyond you, or if it's just going to live in a digital space. If this is something that's going to be that you're just building to live in a static or in a digital space, it's not going to go very much further, and it's just going to be in-house kind of thing. Your design is going to be different than if that document were to be printed and then taken and left in the men's room or the women's room at McDonald's or Chuck E. Cheese. That's important to understand when you're talking about what information you're conveying. Also, it can be free advertisement, right? So if your design looks good and someone else picks it up and says, wow, that's a really well-designed document. And they may want to get in contact with the people who have that. So they may contact the company or whatever and find out who they're using or whatever. I mean, that's all great advertisement. But still, you want it to be perceived as professional when it lives outside of the intended use. So always consider that this may live beyond you. And also consider, too, the fact that this may come back to haunt you in a criminal case because your company did something dirty that they wasn't supposed to. So make sure that you consider those things when you're designing and writing that document as well, because things that you leave in, remember what I said, sometimes the white space is just important as the things you don't say. All right, so keep that in mind. Let's see, how many slides do we have left? All right, we're almost done, and then we'll be able to give this up. All right. It's just going to run a little over. So pay special attention to these additional considerations when designing the digital document. Adobe Acrobat and PDF files, portable document format. These documents are going to be readable via Adobe Acrobat, or heck, there are tons of phone apps now that will open these things up and let you read them. They're like photographs of that printed page, and therefore difficult to alter. So when it's saved as a PDF, especially if you have that PDF password protected, and you can do this with Word documents as well, password protect them. These are the only ways that I will typically submit information, because I don't want people taking the information that I have given and altering it and using it for their own gain. But keep in mind that these can be edited still. Even in those cases, people can copy and paste, but edits appear as handwritten type comments on top of the page, not incorporated into the page. PDFs cannot be redesigned without the permission of the writer and an advanced version of Adobe, which can be expensive. Still, that said, always make sure that you are covering yourself. Make sure that you cover that document, passworded, protected, or just submit it as a PDF so that people can't yank your information away. Keep in mind they can still copy and paste it, but as long as you still have the access to the PDF document and it's signed and all that good stuff, then you have proof later if you need to use it. Web pages, unlike typical print and PDF pages, web pages must be designed to accommodate the shape of a screen, and this is going to be bouncing around different. Chunking works differently, because chunking on a computer screen is much different than chunking on a cell phone. So you're going to have to consider these things. Most computer screens are more landscape than portrait, whereas a phone is going to be more portrait than landscape, or it can be both. Wider than they are high. Also, content must be written in smaller, more discrete chunks than in print documents. We do not like long paragraphs in a digital world, okay? In a digital world, we like shorter paragraphs, things that we can go through kind of quickly. Have you ever noticed that magazine articles are vastly different than your popular articles that you might see at nationalgeographic.com? And the reason why is because people will tend to read these a little easier, more quickly on a digital space. Tablets, smartphones, and e-readers. Today's workplace documents might be read on a large computer screen, small laptop, tablet, phone, e-reader. Keep in mind the size when writing and designing of these, which is why I say don't go less than a 10-point font. Other than that, we have the review questions here. Things that you might want to consider. What is page design and why is it important? What design skills will you need to learn to complete in today's workplace? What are the 4 design categories that you need to consider when designing a document? What are 5 considerations you need to keep in mind when shaping a document? What is white space and why is it important? What are 3 considerations you need to keep in mind when styling words and letters? What are 5 ways to add emphasis within a document? What are 3 considerations you need to keep in mind when using headings and for access and orientation? And what are 3 considerations to keep in mind when designing for your audience? And finally, in what ways do web pages differ in design from print pages? So consider these questions as we end this lecture. If you have any further questions, does anyone have a question right now? Doesn't look like it. So If you have any further questions, please feel free to email me. Let me know what you need. Uh, Other than that, this is me signing off, saying thanks. Have a great one and stay healthy out there.
All right, take care.
Take care.